Hello, my name is Gary Anderson. At the end of this short video you'll become more clever than the professor of mathematics. Like you believe me. To be specific, you will see why the method they used to measure inequality is fatally flawed. That is, if professors of mathematics do not already know and are lying to us. I'll try not to make this too boring or difficult to understand, though you should have little trouble. For the last part of this video, I'll go into the politician lies about how the rich are being squeezed for taxation. Also, how to make banks and corporations responsible. These are primary common sense facts that government know about. You all know inequality has been getting worse, and yet we hear government say it is getting better. Here's a recent chart from a Bloomberg article, The Rich and the Mega Rich, Lithold's chart. While politicians tell see-through lies to your face and expect you to believe them, or don't care you know the truth. The reason many of you think there is something wrong is that there is something wrong. Politicians have contempt of us and are therefore worthy of our disdain. This is Nick Hanua, a plutocrat, an unashamed mega-rich capitalist. He is also honest, and in 2012 reveals the myth about the job creators, showing our politicians to be liars. He admits, rich people do not create jobs. An ordinary consumer is more of a job creator than a capitalist like me. Anyone who has run a business knows that hiring more people is a course of last resort for capitalists. It is what we do if, and only if, rising consumer demand requires it. You may not buy a Rolls Royce, but your labour and spending provides the income for those that do. The job creators are you. Those who politicians call wealth creators are more hoarders of wealth. So, now you will not be fooled by politician lies about this again. You should see his videos with Ted. They are refreshingly honest. Here's his latest. It is a warning to fellow plutocrats. He says, I see pitchforks as an angry mobs with pitchforks, because while people like us plutocrats are living beyond our dreams of avarice, the other 99% of our fellow citizens are falling further and further behind. The problem is that inequality is at historic highs today, and it's getting worse every day. He advocates greatly increasing the minimum wage and says, I know that most people think that the $15 minimum wage is this insane, risky economic experiment. We disagree. We believe that the $15 minimum wage in Seattle is actually the continuation of a logical economic policy. It is important to note that his honesty is entirely motivated out of self-interest. He admits this fact. He saw the writing on the wall years ago. He's not the only one, yet government and their lackeys still lie about it. None of this is complicated. Simply rewind to the bit that you're stuck on. Inequality, as we all know, is about the lack of equality, the state of being equal. In this case, it's about your income, not about your status, rights or opportunities. Anyway, I was first alerted to this con when I read that Cameron had said that inequality had returned to 1986 levels. This was based on ONS figures and was clearly a load of rubbish because it did not fit reality. According to the ONS, we'd become a more equal society under the Tories, the party that only attacks one end of the income scale. The ONS gives them statistics that are used for political motive and which clearly are designed to deceive. The ONS use something called the Gini coefficient or the Gini Index to measure inequality. We all know there are lies, damn lies, and then there's statistics. Government use maths experts to lie to us. But let's be kind and say these experts did not know and they were fooled themselves. We can all be fooled, though I'm amazed such intelligent people continue to be fooled. I'll show you how silly they are with this little sketch. Want a woodbine? Oh, hello, am I on? Hello. My name's Ben. Welcome to the smoking room here at the Central Statistical Office. This is my first job as a statistician after I left Oxbridge. We just calculated the level of inequality in the UK at 32.3. Hello, glad to see you after all this time. I'm still here, same building, but now with the Office of National Statistics, as you know. How many years has it been? 2013 minus 1987? No, simple maths, can't do it. This is no longer the smoking room, of course. This is the Nelson Mandela room where we compile immigration data. You may have heard we're pretty relaxed about that. I'm head of department. Quite a coincidence you coming back here. We've just issued last year's level of inequality for the UK, especially since it's back down to the same 1986 levels. What do you mean? It's not a rubber band. It's an objective measure used by experts for calculating inequality. Yes, I know we have a rich group of multi-millionaires at the top now. I don't care if the gap between the richest and the poorest has increased 100 times or 1,000 times. Look at what the measure says, it cannot lie. For heaven's sake, man, I went to Oxford, you know. They must all see there's something wrong if we were back to 1986 levels. How did they all miss it and not even question their findings? The major fact we all know is that since 1986 the rich bosses have broke away and give themselves massive pay rises. This is why they cut or give small rises to the workers that made them all this money. Year on year they get much richer, compounding their wage rises of previous years. By all accounts, a greedy group of individuals that torn up any semblance of wage differential that they had between themselves and the workforce. Indeed, it's no longer just greed with them, it is avarice, insatiable greed. Some, the rich and the toadies, say it's all about envy, but simply about fairness. Fair versus deceiving the public for rich and powerful people's greed. Fair as in not exploiting people, which means giving them a wage they can live on. If we're going to have a capitalist society, which seems our fate, then it should be one with rules. We're not as stupid as the government take us for. Don't we all know that pay restraint is for workers and not for fat cats and the bankers? We all know the "we are all in it together" only applies to workers and people on benefits. These are the facts that politicians will not admit. They are doing okay on 70k plus expenses. To some, this is only secondary to power and personal wealth, of course. So then, I read the ONS report that gave this blockbuster fact. It reads, the Gini coefficient for disposable income in 2011-12 was 32.3%, the lowest level since 1986, partly due to earnings falling towards the top. What? Earnings are falling at the top? What plans are the ONS on? As far as I know, the directors and CEOs never took a wage cut for 1 year in the last 3 decades. It would have made the national press. Look here. In the same year, 2012, FTSE 100 directors increased their wages 27%. They're on millions. What rise did you get in the recession? I bet not 27%. I had never come across the Gini coefficient before, so I looked at how it was calculated. I was quite good at maths at school and spent most of my working life with numbers. Also, I worked on data capture systems and the automation of turning data into information. I had an idea how it could be fiddled. I was right. I was stunned nobody else had picked it up. How could such highly educated people not realise? Objectively, my qualifications is nothing compared to theirs. Indeed, the quite good is an exaggeration in comparison. This methodology, used the world over by mathematics experts, seemed designed to deceive. So I contacted the CEO and Director General at the ONS about my concerns. They ignored this and all I got back was the usual propaganda. This is my response. So, let me say again, this is really very simple. Indeed, many of you will use spreadsheets and will tell me that there are better ways to do things. Or some maths experts will say you didn't explain about X or Y. I know all this, I'm just making it easier for others to understand. You can have the job to verify or disprove these results. So then, the methodology, let's start with the Lorenz curve, which is simply this. So what we have here is a chart if all the income was divided equally across the country. So 20% of the population would have 20% of the income, and 40% of the population would have 40% of the income, 60% of the population with 60% of the income, and 80% of the population with 80% of the income, and of course 100% of the population would have 100% of the income. But it's not like that in real life. This is an imaginary country now. We'll give the first quintile 5%, the next 10%, making run total 15%, the next quintile 20%, making it 35%, the next 25%, making it 60%, and the final quintile 40%, making a total of 100. So this is an imaginary country, and if we join these lines up we get an area below the level of equality, and if we colour that in we can see how unequal the country is. And of course we have to get that into a number, and the Gini Index is simply this red area divided into the total area below the equality line, and we'll get a number from that. The number varies between 0 for complete equality, when everybody gets the same, and 100. This is when one person has all the income and everybody else has nothing. The two examples they give to make it all look perfectly reasonable and logical. Many intelligent people will now be saying you are a nutter and the experts were correct. I can understand how the public could not see it. I could see that this method was unfit for purpose from the very start. How could the experts miss it? Now the explanation. It's all there. We should first look at the one person has all the income example. What if that person dictates to the others, if you don't want to starve, then work for me and make me more money. Refuse to work and you get no benefits, like here in the UK. Let's start with a linear bar chart. By the way, this is the easiest way for you to get the Gini Index from data. Copy and paste from a spreadsheet into an online calculator. Let's just have that person on £1 million income per annum with 209 workers on 10,000 net after benefits. A total of 210 people. You'll see why 210 in a minute. Here's the chart. Clearly it would be a massively unequal society. All those people in the service of one rich one. If we put this in a chart with 10 groups of 21 showing average income for each group, what do we find? Gosh, what a surprise. This gives the impression society is more equal. Now, what do you think will happen if we distribute into only 5 groups, like the Lorenz chart? Amazing, they look more equal. Just compare with the actual distribution of income on the right. Now, let us copy this data into the Gini. This is the site of Peter Rosenmay. I will include the link for you to test yourself. There are other sites, of course. You can see that it looks like income is rising for all on the exact same low income. This is a consequence of the methodology used, cumulative income. This false illusion will be the same here for millions of people in UK on minimum wage. The Gini for this population is 31.89. The lower the number, the more equal society. This is better equality than we have in the UK with 32.3. Not quite one person has all the income perhaps, simply one very rich person and all the others very poor. Somebody on a million with all his paupers relying on benefits to top up income. Newsflash. This is a socialist cooperative where the workers are paid more fairly and equally. There's a 6 times income differential between the top managers and the lowest workers. The Gini may be the same as the UK, but you all know the inequality of the UK is a lot worse. In fact, if these were different countries, then both the ONS and the government would say inequality is better in the dictatorship. Inequality is not about how rich or poor a country is, it is just how unequal the incomes are. What lies would say this country with a more equal income differential of 6 times has the same equality as ours? Oh, I already answered. Our government with the backing of the ONS. To put this into context, this could be the UK with 100,000 people on a million and 20.9 million people on 10,000. And here showing both distributions, your screen needs to be nearly 10 times higher to accommodate the income difference if both were on the same scale. Important. This is simply the difference between the poor and the average income, not the inequality between the poor and the rich. Just comparing the run total of income to the average wage, nothing more. By the way, I've not checked. Doesn't using a sliding scale affect the percentage on the Gini? Isn't the lowest quintile less area, so therefore makes the poorest have little effect on Gini inequality? It just looks wrong to me. For equality of 2 people, they should be treated the same. If one was given £1 million, then the other should get £1 million also. It is clearly not equal to give one £1 million and the other 10,000, with the rest as profits sent elsewhere, possibly another country, to avoid tax. Inequality between the two is £990,000. You need give that amount to the poorest to make society equal. The income differential is 10,000%. The richest income is 100 times the poorest. If instead you add in another person on a low income of 10,000, then you have not made the gap between the rich and the poor 1 penny less. The differential is still 10,000%. Inequality has not lessened an iota. In fact, you have doubled the people on the same inequality. The inequality between the richest and the poorest is still £990,000. You now actually need give that amount to both the poorest to make society equal. Adding more people on lowest income does not make the poorer in society more equal to the richest. It just adds more disparity in society. Any system which pretends society is getting more equal simply by adding loads more poor people is perverse, and the supporters of it are corrupt. Systems like the Gini. Society is getting more unequal, not less. Anyway, back to the data. If I remove 4 workers, you will see that we get the same Gini coefficient as the UK at 32.3. Also the same equality as the chart just shown of a cooperative. Some may have said that is just 210 people and not a country. How do I get from one to the other in the prior example? If we double the number on a million and workers, or any multiple, we get the same result. It could be 10 or 1,000 times. It's the same frequency distribution, no change. Try it yourself. Look, copy, paste, calc, no change. What would have happened had we just doubled the number of poorly paid workers instead? Take out a boss on a million. Wow, look, 19.36, what a surprise. The government and ONS would say they have a much greater equal society than the UK. Yes, if we increase the numbers of people on poor income, then inequality gets less. More poor people enable the rich to increase their incomes and still show an improvement. Gini magically makes society look more equal with no more income paid to poor people, simply because of frequency distribution. The magic genie is actually hiding inequality simply by adding more people on low income. But the ONS and maths professors did not know this, apparently. You may have noticed over the recent decades that we have had millions of low-paid immigrant workers enter the country. That obviously would bring the Gini number down, falsely making the UK look a more equal society. Okay, you want to see another example with an even wider income differential? Some experts may say in excuse making that if there was more of a curve instead of a straight line, then that would make society more equal. No, it can make the gap between rich and poor much more unequal. So this rich person has 205 managers on 50,000 and a total of 3,462 workers on an income topped up with benefits to 10,000, and he, usually he, increases his pay to 10 million. What would be the result of that? What a big surprise. The same Gini outcome as the UK, 32.3, with an income differential of 1,000 times between the most poorest and richest. The UK differential between the poorest and richest is much more worse than this. What is it, Mr. Pullinger and Mr. Watson? The gap between the poorest and the richest person in the UK. Essentially, this is about inequality again. Primarily, we are talking income tax. Firstly, though, VAT, the idea we can be taxed more on top of that already paid. Government clearly lack morality by taxing essentials, e.g. electricity or gas supply, cookers, washing machines, and even sanitary products and maternity pads. These are not luxuries. Just in case they think of it, taxing water would be immoral also. In fact, all governments know they punish poor workers the most with taxation. They know that after the bills are paid that you have little, if anything, left over. They know taxation is a greater burden on the poor working class, what Cameron calls hard-working families, than on the rich. Government try pretend that is the rich they squeeze, to those with the broadest shoulders, but they all know the truth. All political parties do this to look acting fair. Government now have to give even more benefits, which they complain about, because those on low income are squeezed more and more. People face faster rising bills, which they tax again. They take with one hand and give back with the other. But we have seen they want to cut these benefits also. Yes, it is really you, the working public, they squeeze until the pips squeak, not the rich who whinge and say is then being squeezed with many times your income. I'm sure not all believe the deceptions or fall for their spin, e.g. the rich pay more of the tax bill now than ever before. You must have heard the propaganda. It is usually a Tory saying the top 1% pay 30% of UK's income tax. obviously meant to imply the rich pay loads more than their fair share. They seem to feel very sorry for this poor 1% being picked on, perhaps themselves or their friends, so it is only natural they are upset. The top 1% of taxpayers earn more than £160,000 and up to many millions, so don't feel too sorry for them. You or I should be so badly hard done by. The reason why they pay more though is obvious. The rich-poor gap gets ever wider and greedy fat cats don't have their wages held down like they do to their employees. It is very insulting and contempt of us to use this argument, being very basic maths and purely common sense. Pay the poor more and they would pay more tax also. The rich are earning much more than ever before in comparison. They held our wages down. Of course they pay more tax. They are the ones getting more. They are right it is a bad thing though, only insofar as the fact it means the richest are getting massive wage rises and leaving the rest of us behind. We need fair wage legislation with a higher minimum and a lower maximum to make income less unequal. Please see skillful.com for my proposal. I'm not the first to make one. Warning: a so-called fair flat rate will simply mean that the rich will pay even less tax, and therefore those on a lower wage will pay a bigger portion of the UK tax bill. ISAs are used as an example of why avoidance is legal. ISAs are not tax avoidance per se. Government want you to take them out, indeed even advertise the fact. Do governments advertise other ways to avoid tax? They are a tax incentive on saving after you have paid income tax. Totally different, except to crooks. Government could make both evasion and avoidance of income tax illegal. So, if this is earnings redirected and used to buy property for you, then that is still income. Again, this is not about envy, but simply about fairness. Fair as in treating people equal without putting a greater burden on the poor to favour the rich. A burden is defined in the Oxford Dictionary as a load, typically a heavy one, or to cause someone worry, hardship or distress. The rich say that the burden falls mainly on them, but is those on low to average income who it clearly has great effect, objectively causing much more hardship. My complaint in a capitalist society isn't that people should not profit from their ideas or skills, or against wage differentials. They certainly should be paid more. It is about the gross inequality of income and the exploitation of workers, especially the lower paid. Some think that governments have no control over corporations and banks doing wrong. This is a mistaken belief. All lawmakers could go after the weakest link, the people making corrupt decisions. However, the authorities are also corrupt and even help them avoid criminal prosecution. They know the big fines are paid by you and I, the customers. The crooks just take more from us and increase their salaries year on year. These are a privileged group of greedy people working within corporations and banks. They have special rights, advantages and immunities compared to you and I. This is on top of their massive salaries. They can get away with robbing us with all sorts of scandals, even crash our economy, all for the sake of greed and profit. But government is afraid to tackle them or is helping them for mutual benefit. Though the prime motivation is market confidence, there is a symbiotic corruption, e.g. charges and fines. Confidence is lost because of not properly dealing with the problem and jailing any crooks. I have actual documentary evidence that top people in government agencies help them. They even altered our official complaint of fraud. People in authority criminally pervert the law so that the lesser crime of mis-selling is used instead of fraud, but that is for the next video. Unfortunately, the financial aspect is not all of it. I got my right hand fingers sliced in half, but people have lost whole limbs or being killed because of them. They can get away without criminal prosecution after telling people to work on machines without safety guards for greater productivity, i.e. profits. They not only get away with it, they put up their large salary next year as though nothing had happened. Why do they get away with it? Many people know why, including government, yet they do nothing. It is because corporations and banks are strangely treated as though they are a person. It's called a separate legal entity. But this entity does not have a mind of its own. Does a company act on its own unaided, or is it controlled by people? Yep, people commit crimes, not things. Does a gun commit murder, or does the person holding it? Just because more than one pull the trigger does not make them innocent. It is people, not the corporations, that should be made culpable. Calling a gun a person or legal entity so the guilty party goes free is clearly corruption. The defenders of such a system must therefore be corrupt to want them to escape culpability. The word corporation comes from corpus, the Latin word for a body of people. There is absolutely no reason for them to escape legal retribution for any crime, is there? After all, corporations are just a simple fiction, something that was invented. Ask any lawyer. It is now used to protect criminals from being held to account. How many have been jailed? Government can simply amend Acts of Parliament for corporations to make this body of people personally responsible for any crime they commit. This is their point of weakness. They know this. Remove corporate protection and then the people become responsible for any corrupt or criminal decisions, the people committing crimes. That is it. You now have the base knowledge, so you should no longer fall for propaganda and lies about inequality, tax, or corporations again.